To share yet. There we go.
You are should be presenter right now. No, not seeing it?
We're getting there.
Oh, yep.
Does it all look good on your end, Kristen?
Looks perfect.
All right, we're ready.
Okay, great. So thanks everybody for coming again, or a couple folks for maybe just for the first time, because you've heard such great things about the first one. I've got to go. But I really wanted to start us off with maybe taking about 10 and even up to 15 minutes to sort of for folks to be able to talk about the results of the homework. And so, I mean, we could do this a couple of ways. In terms of people sharing, Kristen, if you have access to folks' homework, it might be kind of nice if we could just take a peek at some people's introductions and have folks maybe talk a little bit about what they observed based on the criteria we were thinking about last time.
Okay, what I'll start with, if it's all right, is Anthony Sue sent his paper, so I'll put that, it's a paper that he submitted. I will put it online for you guys to see, so I'll take back sharing privileges. And Anthony's mic is not working, so what he's going to do is he's going to type to everyone in the chat so that he can tell us, answer his question about the introduction. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
Oh, wow. Oh, my colors.
I apologize for sharing my screen, and I don't know if this is the best way to share, but I cannot see Anthony's comments at this point either.
Okay,
we can.
We can see his comments now.
Perfect. Okay.
At our end. So Anthony, so this is a paper. It looks like it's not Anthony's paper, right? This is a published, yeah, okay, great. And so it looks like, so the first thing he notices is the first paragraph, the first sentence he thinks is too broad. And Chris, can we scroll down a little bit past the abstract? Point out, notice that it has all the nice stuff we were talking about. Do we agree that first sentence looks pretty broad? Yes?
Yeah.
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 And then it makes a giant, I don't mean to lead to say it's like bad, but something really, really specific, at least from my perspective outside the field, it seems really specific. And then we talk about the last sentence of the paragraph, it's not too informative or specific. So the last sentence, however, liver and kidneys have been reported to be the most affected target organs. And again, probably depending upon what the actual purpose is, that actually might be true. That it's not, doesn't say anything about antioxidants or hesperidin. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Were there any additional comments there? But the middle was all right. Okay. And it looks like this particular journal is formatting things in almost what I would describe as an IEEE kind of format, where it looks like the references are all cited numerically. So as they show up, like the first thing would be the first, the number 1 in brackets is the first thing in the references I'm guessing here. And it does look like the person does a fairly good job. It looks like it covers 6 of the different pieces of literature in just that second paragraph alone. Goes back, it covers 2 more in the next paragraph, and then it goes even back to number 2 as well, the second one. Good discussion on the laminar, but the sold stuff that was toxic on that. Okay. option.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
Do you want to share yours?
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, maybe just send it, email it to Kristen real quick.
You're saying lots of things.
last paragraph had been more specific, so let's look at that last. Today, no published reports are available on the efficacy of hesperidin in protection against TCE-induced Tom, help me out with that.
Nephrotoxicity.
Thank you. Therefore, in the light of above inferences, we designed this study to investigate the effects of hesperidin against TCE-induced renal damage in rat, that word again, model. So, the word I can't pronounce, Anthony said, could be more specific to include oxidative stress apoptosis. Am I saying that right? Apoptosis? Good. So one of the great things about the comments and stuff I think that Anthony's offering here, it does show much more sort of the, able to point out some of the perhaps flaws, if we will, in this introduction, because he's familiar with the content, so he knows that things could be more specific because of things that are being left out, which I think is great. Which, by the way, is always a good reason to have your colleagues who are familiar with your work, workshop your papers and stuff with you.
Would you like me to share the next one? Would you share either longs or cyans?
Yes, either one or both,
Okay.
but not simultaneously. By the way, thank you so much, Anthony, for sharing that and all your observations.
Hopefully you're now doing cyan.
Yes, I believe, is that your Cheyenne? Cheyenne, and I'm saying it incorrectly. Cheyenne?
Yes.
Okay, good. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about what it is that you observed?
You want to zoom in a little bit so we can...
Kristen, can you zoom in maybe?
You're going to have to speak up a little bit, probably.
Kristen, can you zoom in a little bit so that we can read?
In the bottom right. Or there.
Where did you guys want me to go?
No,
There we go.
That looks perfect. Go ahead.
So, I think the first paragraph, the first sentence, I think it's broad enough. It gives some idea about the toxicity of chromium itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last sentence, which is, the whole thing is 3 sentences, but, so the last sentence, it says that why this process is important, so that we can transfer this carcinogenic species to a safer one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it gives the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And the middles are literature review. So I tried to cite as many as I can, but
at least you don't leave anybody out.
Very good.
And the last paragraph, so it gives the objective, but I have that sentence in the middle, which I highlighted it. I'm not sure if it should be here or it should be in the previous paragraph.
Again, I'll speak to it from somebody who just is thinking about papers in general, but then also I want to stress here, somebody who probably is the least likely to understand the content. I personally don't find that sentence just because it's not in the previous paragraph, to be a distraction. It does seem to, it's even by the sentence structure itself, like the beginning with the although such and such, that to me seems to show that you're actually building off of the point you want to make and building toward the next point that you want to make.
Oh.
So I don't see it as distraction. I don't know how other folks might feel about that. I don't think there's a fixed rule that you can't refer back to the sources you're citing just because you've stopped reviewing that.
So I highlighted a couple of other keywords that, so the parameters that I wanted to discuss in this paper, and the different sections of the paper. So one part is the batch reactor and the other part is flow.
Mm-hmm.
So I just tried to separate it and separated the parameters.
Wow, that's...
That's it.
Christian, can you use the slider in the lower right to just increase a little the size of the print?
I can't tell how it looks to you guys. How is that?
That's better, thanks.
Yes, thank you.
That's
Yeah, and just one last comment. I mean, I actually, sometimes folks think that they can't repeat things. I actually like in science papers when people say things like this study focuses on, this study couples. I think it's a good idea to reinforce those things, and also it helps draw the attention that it's going to do something, and it's also going to do something else, or it's going to do something even more specific. I think having that sort of repetition actually creates coherence rather than redundancy. A lot of times people don't want to repeat something because they think that makes them sound redundant, and that's not necessarily true.
Could I ask a question about, so China's wrapping up things in that last paragraph, and there's still a sentence there that has a reference there. Is that something that's too distracting at that point, or is it because you're specifically referring to a test type you're going to be doing that reference?
So the one following the yellow sentence, so that's the paper that I'm verifying my model with.
Okay.
So I needed to cite it, and so that
I see.
But the previous one, the yellow one, it also has citations. I just wanted to separate my work. I wanted to emphasize how my work is different from the others. That's why I put it there, so I'm not sure.
And again, it's sort of outside the discipline. I actually don't find that to be a distraction, but I also want to be emphasize. I'm not saying that makes it either right or wrong.
Mm-hmm. Or could China have started with the yellow sentence?
Yeah. So an option would be to start out that last paragraph. I still think the study focus on is a good place to start, but it might be a good. I mean, one could even be more explicit in saying, my work, builds off of so-and-so in this way, my work builds off of so, or relies on these results from this person in this way, and then move on. And have those two sentences right together without any kind of interruption.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's an option. And by the way, I think it is important to be thinking about the different options that you have. So, Kristen, maybe we could take a look at Long's, I think, was the other option you had, right?
Yes, he just emailed it to me, so bear with me 1 second. Alana, I saw you emailed one. Would you be, if I were to make you presenter, would you be able to share yours with us while I get Long's email? And if not, I can pull yours from email too.
Do you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, I can try. My computer is being a little buggy, but I can certainly try.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and pass you the presenter role, and we'll see if we can walk you through it.
Okay, I'm opening it now, hopefully.
Okay. Also online, UPRM, Louisa, Gianni, if any of you would like to share one or would like to email one to me to share, please feel free to do so. I'm going to go grab my email after we find out if Alana's up and running.
Am I presenting now? Or?
What you'll need, it's not showing right now, what you'll need to do is, you should see a button that says share content, or you can go up to the upper left, there's a share link. where you can press on share, and then it'll give you a number of options of how to share. I usually share my screen quickly, but that can also show a lot of stuff you may not want to show.
It says now you are presenter.
Yep, that's good.
Okay, so, yeah, I mean, I can share my screen. That's not a big deal. Let me see if I can, it's just moving slowly, so I apologize.
No, no problem. If it doesn't work, we will have,
Memory
I'll grab it from email.
Okay. It's just whirling circles, waiting.
Yep, yep. Looks like it's starting to come up on this end, but we're not seeing it yet.
Okay, I have it on my computer, sort of, click on it. Do you see anything, or?
Still not on my end.
Okay. Wait, my whole screen just turned blue. Sorry, this is like...
Can you pull it up, Kristen, on yours?
I'm just going to my email right now to get it while I was trying to get her up. Hold on 1 second. I'm getting longs as well, so we'll have both of them. Alana, I'll grab it from you. I'll grab presenter. Thanks for trying. I am going to share my screen and share Alana's email, and then we'll jump to Long. How do you guys see this? Is it looking okay? Not big enough? Too small?
A little bit bigger? Hey, can you, yeah, it's full screen, huh? Why?
How's that?
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, it looks good in our end, so maybe, Alana, if you could maybe talk us through it a little bit?
Is this yours, Lon? No, it's still on us.
Yeah.
Ilana, are you on mute?
Alana, are you still there? We've got yours up that you should be able to run us through if you'd like to.
Oh, yeah, we might have.
She's working on reconnecting. Do you want to bring up Longs while she's reconnecting, Kristen? There we go. All right.
Sorry, guys. Is that big enough?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, this is good, Christine.
So you're on, Long.
Okay. So this is my real intro. Just has 3 paragraphs. There are no other sections. So the first paragraph, because I'm going to submit it to like as a form of communication or letter, so it's very short.
Yeah.
So the first paragraph, I talk about the application of my material. So I just want to tell the reader that this material is very important and how it's going to be applied in practice. And in the second paragraph, I talk about the drawback of current synthesis technique and how it is synthesized. I divide into step 1 and step 2, just tell others that it's very complicated. And in the third one, I'm tell the reader that how I'm going to do it and the characterization techniques and also like the future perspective, how others are going to utilize this strategy to synthesize some other techniques.
So is this, I have a question. Is this these short communicate, is that what you guys call them in your field, a short communication or a letter? Is that which is a slightly different genre. And so the absence of a literature review, from my perspective, again, outside the discipline, is that I would expect it not to include a literature review, unless you were building off of something specific that had happened before. And that final paragraph, something, I don't know if we talked about this at all last week. As a reader, I actually appreciate the first person plural when the team speaks themselves about themselves in that first, as we did this, we did that. It's not a requirement, and it's certainly not. I would say it's not the norm. Although there is, I think, a push, at least from certain journals, to talk in the third person. In fact, there are a couple of journals that actually require it, or they say that they do. So I find that to be really, really helpful. What do other folks notice here?
I'll just jump in and say that the first sentence of the second paragraph seems like kind of a big historical thing that might have been at kind of the top of the funnel, like up at the beginning, as opposed to in the middle after you're starting to get more specific. But that's something that's understandable to me, that might have been kicked off at the top. Whereas as opposed to reduce graphene oxide starts to, my hair hurts already. So I mean, that's the only. Whereas if you let me gently into this paper, it might have helped to be better. I don't know.
No, that's an interesting observation. The other thing that, the minute you mentioned it, it does bring to mind. And again, I don't want to suggest that I know exactly what folks in the civil and environmental engineering fields should be doing. If this were a paper coming from, let's say, the social sciences or the humanities, I would actually be looking for a reference for that documentation as well. I think if you started the paper off, like the Thomas suggested, with that being the first sentence, I might not look for that reference. I might take it as, again, that sort of notion of common knowledge. And I think you're treating it as common knowledge. That's why Tom read it that way. But because it isn't coming in the beginning of the paper, and people might be looking for references to previous other research in this particular area of study, it might look like something that needs to be referenced.
Yes, there is a reference for that, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. I just removed other references.
Got it.
To make it consistent.
Other observations? Keeling.
I think the first sentence of the final paragraph does a good job of identifying the objective of what's going to come next or what will come in future letters, and does a pretty good job of outlining the train of thought in a very logical fashion.
Yeah, I agree.
And then the last sentence kind of even builds upon further more than just what's the paper.
Right, actually sort of anticipates, and again, because it's a slightly different genre, and the short communication or the letter format, actually to have where this could lead potentially, instead of holding it for the conclusion, it might be a good idea to put it right there, so folks want to read on. So Kristen, I don't know if do we have Alana's paper available for introduction?
Yes, we do. Yeah, let me just,
okay.
Alana, I think you're back.
Can you hear me?
I am going to, bear with me, I'll just on my screen, get back to email. Can you guys see this okay?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Yes, we can see it fairly clearly, although I don't hear Alana very clearly.
Can you hear me?
Alana, you're very quiet.
Hello?
Yeah, you're very quiet, Alana. Maybe you want to chat. I know it's annoying to do that, but you're very hard to hear.
Okay, I can chat. That's fine. If my computer doesn't freeze.
I think you're all seeing Alana just chatted okay. I know that, apologize for the technical difficulties here. This is sometimes hard to get everyone connected.
Not your
Just so you know, and really no worries. I mean, as I'm sure all of us, as East Coast students and teachers, I know some others over the table also are teaching. When we're using technology in the classroom, it never runs smoothly. So it's actually not the distraction it might seem. Maybe, Alana, would it be a distraction if I just perhaps ask some questions and maybe, and I can, if we hear you even slightly, I can try to maybe repeat them, your response back to make sure that we understand them?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think so. So one of the things, so your, how do you feel about your literature view, which I can see actually quite clearly happens in that second, third, and fourth paragraph?
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
How do I feel about it?
Yeah, do you like the way it's set up?
Yeah, I like it.
So other folks, because I just want to say, I actually think it, I mean, even just looking at it really quickly, it looks like, I could say it seems effective, but perhaps it would be good for us to think about, and even if not just Alana, what do you think is making it effective? Anybody want to chime in?
Small paragraph, short paragraph.
Good. They're small, short paragraphs. Okay, good. What else?
I mean, I could say I think something that's really important for us in particular in toxicology is that we often have to justify why we're studying something. Just like, I mean, I guess that's true for everybody, but in our case, our justifications often come from epidemiology studies. So, and in particular, human related, because a lot of our studies are, in vitro or in animals. So I think epidemiology evidence gives us a really good reason why we're trying to study something.
Right, and I actually think you demonstrate, the way you explained it, that actually clarifies for me exactly why you seem to have structured your, those three paragraphs that way, because you start out with the existing, the weight of existing evidence was really large, but then you go specifically into the several epidemiological studies, and then the next paragraph, although there are some of these things, there are very few that are actually doing something else, or they're not as well understood. So this notion of having sort of justify, maybe not quite the right word I'm using there, but why it is that you're doing something, I think these paragraphs lend themselves to doing just that.
Yeah, that's what I tried to do in it. I tried to sort of make it go from the epidemiology studies to the knowledge gap in a way, because the knowledge gap that I'm trying to address here is the fact that we have these epidemiology studies that show this evidence, but we don't really, the biological plausibility of these associations, in order to establish causation, you have to have that component of it as well. And so that's kind of what me and the rest of my lab is trying to establish, is whether in fact this chemical could be causing the kinds of epidemiology associations that we're observing.
Right. And in fact, and it's also nice the way you go out of that fourth paragraph where it's similarly such and such, and then you're talking specific, this is where you go to injury to the placenta, and then the next paragraph builds off of that very point because the placenta comes into direct contact and sort of shows that sort of movement away. And so I'm curious, Kristen, are we seeing the entire introduction here?
Yeah, the last sentence is on the very bottom, I think. Yeah, I think so. I mean,
okay, so
in the current study.
So if the last sentence is the one that begins in the current study?
No. The last sentence should start, well, oh yes it does, I'm sorry. It looks different to me, sorry.
No worries.
The last sentence, says in the current study, RNA-seq and gene set enrichment analysis were used to quantify genome-wide. That's the last sentence.
Got it.
Did you also see the comment from UPRM saying the sequence is helpful for them in being able to understand the introduction?
What do they mean by the sequence? You mean the sequence of how it's written, or?
I believe they meant the sequence of how it's written. I just copied their chat over again.
Okay, thank you, whoever wrote that.
Okay, so do you think we should move along?
Sounds good. I will make you guys present that.
Okay, great.
You should be good to go.
Okay, great. So here's where we've been. And so today we're going to talk a little bit, and I'm going to actually go through some of this a little quickly, only because I want to get us to the conclusion so you have a chance to, again, talk about maybe some of your own work or papers that you brought in of your own. And so just quickly, the results, the purposes, what did you find, the discussion's purposes, what does it all mean? Want to reemphasize something that came up last time is that although I've separated them both here, the results and discussion are often in the exact same section in your scientific papers, and in fact, you would never find a scientific paper that wouldn't have a results section, but you will find them that don't have a discussion section because it's implied, and when you see that there's no discussion, when you look at a paper and it goes straight from results then to conclusion, that's an indication that the discussion is just embedded in the results. There are some journals, and I'm going to skip over some of them when I get to this slide. There are some journals that actually require that you do separate them, but it's not as common as it might seem if I seem to be talking about them in these sort of discrete ways. Hopefully that made sense. So I just want to point out there are a few things I want to talk about here, and again, I want to go through them fairly quickly. So the first thing is, usually you want to make sure you identify or describe your results before you start interpreting them. But if we have time, we're going to take a look at that cellular paper that we were looking at last time. It's not a fixed rule, and sometimes you have to go back and forth between one or the other. The second thing when you're thinking about the results is that they often use, and I would say probably always use, visuals, and then one would describe the visuals, the tables and figures, throughout the test. And I think it's important to emphasize here that you don't want the tables or figures to speak for themselves. If you don't explain the tables and figures, that means you have to have a huge caption beneath it, and that will disrupt what it is you're talking about. So if we look at, I pulled up a snapshot of this particular, the cellular confinement paper, and you can see that these authors, in fact, they actually talk about table 3, which is above where the results start, but they're very good at talking about figures 2 and 3 in the then they have short little captions about figures 2 and 3 where they actually have the figures. And something else, you rarely see it, but I have seen it a couple of times, and that's probably because I'm looking for it. Make sure that you just have your figures laid out in order. I have seen papers where it goes figure 2, and then you get to figure 3, and then you finally get to figure 1. Again, one could blame that on the journal, but at the same time, hopefully you have a chance to edit your proofs before they get published. It does look odd when that happens. And then the last thing I want to mention about them is that within the results section, you can still use section heading. Again, this cellular confinement system, this is the first article we looked at last week, and the one that I'm talking about again here actually breaks the results into 3 different kinds of results, with the experimental, the simulation, and the dimensional analysis. So again, you can choose how you want to organize that information in terms of the headings, and if you realize that headings are going to be more useful than not using them, you should use headings as opposed to transition sentences. And this is the place where I wanted to spend some time looking at this particular article, but can we just, is PDF just at the end of this file? Or?
No.
Hold on for a second. I just like, if you have the copy of that consumer, they get to consume your cellular money. Yeah. So this is yeah. So this is the results section from that article, and you have it in front of you. And I just wanted to point out some of the things that I highlighted here as I was annotating this. So again, when I saw the results, I actually scrolled through the paper to see if there was a discussion section. There wasn't, so I know as a reader of science papers that it's just going to be included here. I noticed that they had 3 different experimental results sections, and then I looked at things where I was trying to figure out, am I looking at, there we go, everything that I highlighted in yellow. This is where, for me as a reader, here they are describing their results to me, as opposed to interpreting them. Now, there are a couple of places where I think some interesting things happen, and I don't actually want to say whether this is good or bad, but you notice in that first paragraph there's a slight pink bracket around the sentence that begins, there are some outliers, and then the next sentence, however. I think this sentence needs to come where it is, but it is stepping away from just describing the results to tell you there's something else that happened, and we actually anticipated that this could happen, and we're not worried about it. Does that make sense? And they go back into describing what they see, but whenever I see sentences when they say things like which indicates, I don't want to say that they stop describing, but from my perspective as a reader, there's a bit of interpretation going on now, because I'm not sure if you step away and say which indicates such and such, adding that kind of clause, seems to me you're no longer describing, you're trying to point out, give some additional information that if I were looking at the results, I wouldn't see it that way. Again, I'm going to kind of go through some of this quickly. Again, these are places where I saw them describing, but I'm going to come down to this place first. Still describing. So while the Ph.D. results for the 30 sample between these 2 scenarios are similar, interesting changes are noticed. And then they say this shift may indicate. And I would argue that these are not necessarily just descriptive or identifiers, but they're actually moments where some interpretation is going on. And again, I'm not saying that that's good or that's bad. It just means, I think, as readers of science papers and writers of them, we should know when that happens. And if we want to make a move toward interpretation, we want to make sure that it's intentional rather than accidental, if that makes sense. So, for example, if these authors were here and go, oh, no, there's no interpretation going on here, then I would say, as a reader, do you want me questioning that? And if you don't mind me questioning it, then leave it. If you want me just to keep reading on in terms of description, then I would find a way to rephrase it. That makes sense, Tom?
But is this also because there's no separate discussion section that they're merging these two? That's a discussion kind of statement,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. And so it's not, so these are, that's what I'm saying. I wouldn't say that this is wrong or right, because it's not as though I wouldn't expect it, but it's important for me as the reader to know when the discussing is taking place and the results are being reported. And again, it's important, more important for us as writers to know when we're making that kind of move.
Alongside the question that I wanted to raise about the results, she was asking if you can give results without introducing scientific concepts until the discussion. And she said, for example, mitochondrial memory potential before she defined mitochondria. Or should you do it?
Kristen, did we lose you?
No, could you guys hear my question at all? Or do you want to just read Alana's question from the chat?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, it's probably easier.
Can you give results without introducing scientific concepts until the discussion, before I've defined the mitochondria? Should you do any definitions in results? I somewhat want to defer to those of you in the field on this one. My initial impulse would say that the definitions should have already come into the paper. I would find that the result, bringing up these sort of new things in the results seems somewhat problematic to me. But again, I want to just stress, I'm not in the field. Tom, what do you?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So I think the definitions need to come earlier. And in fact, sometimes people, you can even say things like, if you have to define this before you get to the results, you might just, when you offer the definition, and this would be true of perhaps any paper, that you just indicate that I define this term here because it's going to be relevant to the results later, or something like that. Or even in the results section, you might mention as defined in the introduction or something like that. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can now. But now.
Is that Alana?
I think that was Alana.
Yeah, that was Alana. This is Kristen.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just move on sort of quickly here. Again, my main point is here is knowing when being intentional about being descriptive and interpretive. And I just want to get to the very last sentence, though, of the results that comes in as they build toward the conclusion in future work. Future investigations should be directed at evaluating the relationship between RP and turbidity for other types of sediments. And you notice I have this little 6 and 7 on the side. That's because I'm going to talk about some things that happen in conclusion. Can you go faster? Yeah. Oh, there we go. And, okay, so we should be back to the PowerPoint, and now I'm going to sort of speed through. So if you say to yourself, I can't read these slides, don't try. Okay, so skipping this. Well, with purpose of conclusion, this is where I want to go. So the conclusion, and by the way, I'm going to revise part of this. The conclusion sometimes reminds the reader what they've read, because if it's a very short paper, and for example, I don't think that this paper is long enough to actually remind us of everything that we've gone through. It's only 9 pages long. But longer papers do take some time to do that. But they always identify the important implications for the research. And by the way, I want to point out here, this is actually somewhat relevant even to the question I think that Alana was asking about the definitions. The conclusion should not introduce new information or insight. What's new would be where this should go next. And that's where we get to these 6 little bullet points here, the 7 of them. The conclusion can sometimes be broken down into these various parts. The summary of the section, some articles do that. A summary of what the authors learned, probably all articles should do that. And then these next couple of things are something that you may and may not find in all scientific papers, but Sometimes you will see them, and it's important to recognize why they're there. Sometimes the researcher will identify what they still need to learn, and usually that comes in the context of things that they realize was problematic about their research. Now, notice that I use the terms weaknesses or shortcomings because a lot of the research that I looked at preparing for this workshop used that terminology. But I actually, and you see I put in parentheses the word limitations, because sometimes we want to argue, we want to identify the limitations of our research, which is not necessarily weakness. That's often intentional. And in fact, although I'm not going to go back to it, this article that we were just looking at does point out to some of its limitations. And the great thing about pointing out the limitations, and that gets to, I'm going to skip the strengths here for a second, because by pointing out the limitations, you might be able to identify the future applications, if that makes sense, and then recommendations of what things need to be done. Now, I'm going to actually include that annotated conclusion when we share the final PowerPoint with you, so you can see the way that I'm reading their conclusion. But what I'd actually like for us to do right now, we still have about 10 minutes, and I think it's always useful to think about our own writing and somebody else's, is take a few minutes, and we're not going to have a full 15, but to think about your own conclusions of your scientific paper and thinking about the way that it meets or doesn't meet this criteria, and I'm going to go back to that. So if you have your paper in front of you, those of you who prepared it in advance, you might just take a peek at it and see if you can identify any of these 7 attributes or components to your conclusion, so we can have a little moment of quiet while people are looking over their own articles if you want to. And by the way, if you want to look at this cellular article, continue to look at that, the cellular confinement system, you can certainly look at that conclusion as well. That's the only one you have available to you. So, Long, are you looking at your conclusion?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Shannon, are you looking at yours? Very good. Patrick, did you bring one, or you were just looking at the...
I'm just looking at a random one,
okay.
bro.
Great. Did you have one?
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, okay.
Can you guys hear me, Kristen?
Yes, Kristen, we can.
Alana said she doesn't have one yet for her paper.
Okay. Okay. No worries.
Do you want it? So Kristen, Cheyenne's going to send you their conclusion and take a look at that.
Okay.
Sounds like fireworks.
Yeah.
I received Cheyenne's document, but it's being scanned by my email system. Anthony has a comment online to everyone.
albeit briefly. Briefly is not bad, especially if it's a shorter paper, and especially if maybe there aren't recommendations for moving forward. Maybe one of the things that I didn't cover here, or I think I just skipped over it in the slides I flew past, is that oftentimes people think that the conclusion, and when they talk about the implications, it has to be somehow, it's going to change the world. And maybe ultimately it's a small part of something that could change the world, but by itself it's not. And sometimes it's good to have a very short conclusion where the implications will help us to do this, whatever the next step is to eventually changing the world or the ways that we are dealing with this particular subject matter. Yeah, Alana's point about repeating herself in the conclusion, but that does happen, and it happens especially in longer papers. But even the paper that I shared with you, this cellular, I keep forgetting the confinement paper, they spend about, I guess it's maybe 3 pages, maybe 3.5 pages discussing their results. But when they get to the conclusion, they actually sort of do condense and repeat what some of the things that they said in those results. I think that that's a convention, especially in scientific writing, not so much in the social, well, actually, I would say it happens in the social sciences too. Not so much maybe in the humanities. I guess maybe the thing to think about repetition is just repeat yourself in a new way, without it seeming like it's new information.
It's like public speaking. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, that's...
Exactly.
That's because you're young, Yolanda. Someone, when you get as old as I am, you like to be reminded of what you were just reading. So it's a good thing.
Right, and summarizing your main points together as opposed to being separated, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. There we go. We're laughing too.
Wow, you look like you're almost ready to go with this thing, huh? It's impressive. It's good.
Should be reviewed by
So you're working out with them?
Yeah, this is the old paper.
Okay.
Still under review.
Do you, off topics like, are you still communicate with her? Or
Yeah,
say hi to her.
Yeah, my graph is on the graph.
No, you guys are good.
We should do another.
Can you guys see what I'm sharing?
Yeah, so we can see, right, so right at the very top it talks about the conclusion there. So maybe, do you want to talk to us a little bit about it, or?
So, as Ilana said, I feel like I'm just repeating the same thing again. So the first paragraph, I just explained the process and why is it important again.
Sure.
And then the second one, I described what is included in this study. And then the last one is a summary of the results and also what could be included in the model to improve it.
Good. And again, I think these is, again, as part of those 7 components, and again, you'll see that slide when you actually get the final version of it. I mean, everything that you just described are components that one would expect to see. So I just have a question then as a reader, do you discuss any of the limitations to your research? So for example, you say we confined our research to this, but we understand that maybe we need to, that somebody else might broaden it to include this. Do you do that kind of thing? I'm not saying you should.
So I said some parts that I haven't accounted for clogging.
Good.
Precipitation.
Good.
It should be included if it's going to be implemented.
Good. And is that something that you say that your team is going to continue, that's your next step, or is it something more like a recommendation of what others could do?
It's a recommendation.
Great. And the reason I ask that question for everybody is that I often think that that's a really, if your team is currently working on this as your next step, you really should mention that we're, because otherwise somebody else might actually jump. They still might try to jump in. But hopefully, if you're working on it and you're publishing this paper, by the time other people have access to your published work, hopefully you'll actually probably be ready to go with that follow-up research. You know, again, knock on wood.
No vacations for you. You got to work on that before they catch up.
Any other comments, Jen, that you'd like to make about the conclusion, or that?
No, but I would appreciate seeing that.
Okay. So should we go back to the?
I don't think we're presenting.
Okay. Since it's, timing is what it is, we probably should get ready to wrap things up here. It's always good if we still have questions, I think. Yes. Again, so these are some of the things we were talking about. Again, some of the things that introductions do. Again, they don't have to do all of these things. I just want to point out that I'm going to end this. I'm actually not going to talk about them here, but I am going to conclude the actual PowerPoint that you get with a few recommendations. Yeah. So there's some websites I just want to point out that are available to you that may or may not be useful. I point them out simply because some of these are sort of well known from a writing standpoint, like OWL Purdue and Colorado State. But what's different about them is that OWL Purdue, the adding of writing and engineering and writing and engineering at the Colorado State, these are relatively new. And both of these particular resources do have at least one item or one article or one entry that's specifically relevant to civil and environmental engineers. So, for example, under the writing and engineering at OWL Purdue, if you'll be able to access this link, it actually gives you an annotated sample research paper. And what's great about the way they annotate it, they tell you, here we're talking about organizational things, here we're talking about discipline-specific things, and it helps, I think, to, again, think about being an intentional writer as opposed to worrying about or actually just trying to imitate other writing that you may see, which, by the way, I'm not saying you all do that. I do. And then I have to step back and say, wait a minute, am I intending to do this, or am I doing it only because I think it makes me sound like everybody else? And there are, again, couple of the Berkeley and Carnegie Mellon are great resources for thinking about how to write an abstract, which actually is really important. I've included the corpus of contemporary American English, which I think is a really useful site for folks who are non-native speakers of English and want to see the different ways that technical writers use English words. It's by a linguist, but it's very scientific, and I think you find it sort of interesting. And the last thing I want to point out to you is it's a really interesting book, a comparison of practitioner and student writing and civil engineering. And the reason I'm sharing this one with you, too, as you can see, we actually have this here for those of you who are at Northeastern, it's available to us. It's in this particular book, she goes out of her way to help you think of yourself not as a student, but as a practitioner, which I think making that move is really important, so that you start thinking of the people that you're citing and reviewing as your peers and not as experts that you should be deferring to. And there's just a little blurb from her introduction. And that's it for me. Thanks for attending our writing workshop. Any questions anybody might have? Sorry, I don't want to go too much over your time. I know it's valuable.
Kristen, any chat questions at all? Last chat questions that people had?
Not right now, Tom, and thank you very much, Professor Keeling. That was great.
Okay, so I guess we're ready to shut down, yes?
Yes, we'll go ahead and make the slides and the recorded presentation available to all the students.
Okay, awesome. And I'll get you I'm going to make some revisions to that PowerPoint, but I'll get that to you hopefully today or tomorrow.
And I'll thank Professor Keeling on behalf of Protect for a terrific set of webinars. This has been really helpful, and we weren't sure whether the technology would make it work, but it actually worked.
I think
it worked well, and we had some great input from different sites. So thanks to all the trainees for participating and doing your homework on this, and hopefully.
Speaking of homework, don't forget to give your feedback on course sites.
Yay! Good plug, Alexander. So thank you again, Professor Keeling. This was great.
Thank you, everybody.